So here is our old gauge cluster, and here is the new one we're going to be installing from Dakota Digital. Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to be working on my 96 Chevy Tahoe. We're going to be removing the old gauge cluster and upgrading it to this new one from Dakota Digital. So this is the gauge cluster right here. As you can see, it's pretty significantly different from the factory cluster. This is going to give you much more updated and accurate readings, a whole new interface, and on top of that, it's just going to look really good in the vehicle. Big shout out to Summit Racing. Now let's go ahead and pull out the old cluster so we can compare the both of them. Now if you've never removed the gauge cluster, it's actually pretty simple to do. It's basically just two steps. The first one being to remove this dash piece, which you could probably get off with your hands, or you can also use a pry tool or a flathead screwdriver as well. Then past that, whenever it's coming off, this headlight switch is going to stay attached, as well as the transfer case if you have one. They're basically just plugs. You can unplug them. I'll show you how to do it as well. The only real thing to account for is that occasionally it does not want to clear the gear lever. All you got to do is put it in gear, bring it down, and it should be able to come out pretty easily. That's basically like the hard part. Past that, just 4 bolts, one on each corner of the gauge cluster, and that's basically it. Also, feel free to disconnect the battery if you don't want beeping, because eventually it's probably going to beep at some point. Alright, so this plug is pretty simple. This is for the headlight switch, and all it actually is just pushing the section down, squeezing it out. You see it has that little hook there that grabs onto the bracket, and once you push it in, it lets go of the bracket and you just squeeze it through. This one is pretty simple. The one that's probably going to be a little bit more difficult is this one, the transfer case right here, specifically because it's at a more difficult angle. So the easier way to do it is to actually take this off. As you can see, it has that hook there, and basically press those in and pull it out, because that way you'll get some clearance. And then it's basically the same thing, just a little hook right here. However, that one is a little bit more difficult to get through, but it is definitely doable. And we got the dash right here. So there's a bolt in each corner, and they are all 7mm. All right, now here's the crazy part. You got the 4 bolts off. You just grab it. And it comes out. There is actually no wires holding this thing in position. It's essentially just this plate in the back making contact, and that is how it actually gets power. Okay, so here's the comparison right away. You can see a pretty significant difference just in the layout. First off, do want to note that this is the factory cluster. It just has this little gauge overlay kit with it. It's this extra wire. It lights up, and that's basically it. Other than that, it is entirely factory. Well, I guess the needles count too, but anyway. So the difference that you'll see first off is that the tach is now its full own gauge, as opposed to kind of piggybacking off the speedometer. This actually reaches 6,000 RPM, and this one actually reaches 8,000 RPM. Then for the speedometer, it actually reaches 100 on the stock cluster, and then this new gauge cluster from Dakota Digital, it actually reaches 160. So if you were to have an engine swap, this is like the ideal route to go. These gauges right here stay about the same, but you can kind of see it's a different orientation. It's just going to be a really big upgrade because it's so much more heavy duty. It's a much more modern take on the gauge cluster. And then there is customization you can do to this one. So it's all going to be LEDs, and you can get them in red, white, or blue. And they do have a more upgraded version of this model that's full RGBW. It's super cool. Granted, it's going to be more expensive. Another notable difference are these two little screens right here that are probably one of the biggest upgrades that you're going to get, because you can actually customize what you want those to say in terms of information from your vehicle. You can get a digital reading of your speedometer. You can get a digital reading of your tach. You can get timers, 0 to 60 time, all that stuff. It's really cool. Very in-depth for sure. And if you have the factory cluster, I'm pretty sure you're already familiar with the limitations. This one gives you a ton more functionality, as well as upgrading the entire interface. Just want to take a quick second to tell you about my partner for this video, Mint Mobile. You might know Mint as the one mobile network owned by Ryan Reynolds.
Hey there, it's Ryan Reynolds, owner of Mint Mobile.
But what you might not know is that Mint is actually part of the nation's largest 5G network. And you can actually join this network for as little as $15 a month. Switching is super easy. It only takes about 15 minutes, and they sell directly to you online, so you can switch from the comfort of your own home, your garage, or without even getting out of bed. If you're interested in joining the best value in wireless, I have a link in the description box down below, or you can also scan this QR code right here. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Say you want to set up a family plan, but you only have one other person, you can actually set that up with Mint Mobile, because Mint actually offers modern family plans with as little as 2 lines. One of the things that makes switching to Mint super easy is their digital eSIM cards. These make it so you can sign up and activate immediately without even having to go to a physical store. And if for whatever reason your phone isn't compatible with eSIM, they will send you a physical SIM card free of charge. I want to give a big shout out to Mint. Now back to the video. I do know a little bit more of the differences in the unboxing video, so I'm gonna link that in the top right corner, and I can granted show you more features once it's actually installed, but for now let me show you what it actually comes with. Alright, so the main thing is that if you look back here, you see that there's a little port, and that's because this is not wired the same way that the old cluster is, where it's just making contact. This one you specifically do need to wire to all these different features. That does help with the readings, but because it does have a lot more information, it's gonna be more in-depth of an install. So it does come with this instruction manual, and as you can see, it is pretty beefy. It does come with some wires there in the back. This is pretty much the brain right here, and you can see it's very, very in-depth. And then you also get these wires with these fittings here to go to all the different features of the vehicle. However, there is one extra piece I did have to get, and that is this piece right here, the GSS, or the gear shift sender. So you can see backup, ignition, ground, safety, dim, park, reverse, neutral, overdrive, blah, 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 all that stuff, as well as all these extra pieces that go with it. That is specifically because if you look at this cluster, you'll notice it doesn't have that little section down there whenever you're shifting gears for the little arrow to follow, depending on what gear you're in. That little section right there in the bottom. Which is definitely pretty surprising, because that is something you would assume is part of the kit, just to be able to know what gear you're in. Granted, there is a school of thought of, you know your vehicle, you know the gears like the back of your hand. But I do find that there's too many scenarios outside of that where it is definitely necessary. So, sour note that you do have to buy it as an extra purchase, but good thing is that it is fully compatible. In my opinion, they could have just kept that little cutout with the gear selector and just been fine like that. But adding this, it is going to be reading the gear you're in on the little screen whenever you switch gears, to my understanding. Now I'm going to focus on this as cleanly as I can so you can scan it if for whatever reason yours did not come with a sticker if you are doing this as well. I'm also going to link the instructions in the description box down below, but this is pretty heavily outside my area of familiarity. You're dealing with a lot of important wires, so I would definitely suggest, if you're not super familiar with how to do this right off the bat, to probably get some help from a shop or just get it done somewhere else. While it is technically a bolt-on replacement in that it fits directly in the original housing, you do have to do a lot more wiring, and it's pretty in-depth. So I'm getting help from my buddy Leo, who is a professional, to help install this. We'll see how it goes. Alright guys, the Tahoe is back and the new gauge cluster is installed, and I want to give a big shout out to my buddy Leo for doing this, because basically anything cool that's been done to any of my vehicles, it's been him. He did the wrap on this car, he also did the headlights with the retrofit halos, and he's done the gauge cluster. He also did the new head unit in this. He decided to do both at the same time, so big props to him. Could not have done this without him. But let me go ahead and show you what it's looking like, how it works. I just picked the vehicle up, so granted I'm still getting used to it, but as far as overall usage of this new gauge cluster, seems pretty simple. Alright, so just first impressions, this thing is gorgeous. It fits the dash really well. The black and white really stands out, has a nice contrast to it. And little note, but the font of the gauge cluster is actually somewhat similar to the font of the factory pieces of the dash. Granted, it's not one-to-one, but it does make it seem like this is a lot more fitting for the vehicle. We start this thing up. So to see the full functionality of this gauge cluster, the vehicle needs to be on, so I did shut the doors and the windows so that the vehicle being on didn't make too much noise. But as you can also see here, we have CarPlay now, which is awesome, but this is going to be another video because I do want to take the time to really get familiar with this unit so I can more properly explain how it works and some of the cool functions that it has. But on to the gauge cluster. So first off, here's a shot of this driving in the day. I'm filming this whenever it's night, so I'm more specifically going to break it down with the lights on so you can get a little bit more perspective on how this piece actually functions, a little bit more in depth with the actual lights that it has. Now past that, if you are driving at night, you just turn your headlights on and this will actually follow suit. As you can see, we have the illuminated lights. And now I did initially think the little needles were gonna be white as well. I thought it was gonna all be white. However, it's red. Granted, it still looks really cool, but I wanted to at least point that out. And you can see in the little center screen, we have our speedometer. And on our screens to the left, we actually have the time. Now, if you wanna change any of the screens, you'll see down here, we actually have this little switch, and it has a 1 on the left side and then 2 on the right side. So the 1 is for the center screen, the 2 is for the right screen. So if we press the 1, you're able to cycle through the different settings that the vehicle actually has. And honestly, it's really, really awesome. So this is actually the gear that we're in because we're parked right here. And then if you press the 2, it'll change what's on that side. And as for a quarter mile, this vehicle's not winning any races. You can see the tach. It's working all good. And it is honestly such a cool piece. And right here, you'll actually see in the instruction manual, it'll give you a breakdown of all the different things that it can show. And you can actually set them both to show the same thing, which is pretty cool. But I think that I'm going to set it up like this just because it'll probably be the most casual for everyday driving. Now, as for what gear you're in, you can have it be the permanent center screen if you want, but if you're not using that, you can put the vehicle in gear and you'll see it's actually showing you what gear you're actually hitting. It's not going to stay on the screen, but nonetheless, it's going to be there for whenever you're actually switching it, which is going to be a little bit more specific to driving the vehicle more consistently. And this is overall just a much more refined gauge cluster. As you can see, there's the high beam light right there, just above the small screen. There's the left turn signal right there. Got the low fuel signal, which, yeah, we could definitely get some gas. And then the right signal right there. And as you can see, the low fuel is actually staying on the screen. Similar to modern cars where if you have low fuel, it'll give you a little warning and you actually have to clear that to get back to your normal display. And you just press the little switch down here and you can get that screen off and you're good to go. Now, if you are leaving it with the gear selection on the screen, it's basically just gonna read like that. There's reverse, neutral, drive, back to park, and pretty simple, just stays there on the screen for you. Now, this thing came out amazing. I'm so happy with it. In my opinion, gives it a little bit of an OEM plus feel, mainly because the gauge cluster is still analog gauges, whereas it has little screens. Those little screens are gonna be what you're gonna be messing around with if you want a little bit more of a personalized driving experience. But we do also have the new head unit to mess around with, so I'm gonna take some time with that one. So having both a new gauge cluster and a new head unit really modernizes the driving experience. I'm loving driving this vehicle. Let me know if you guys would be interested in a review on this piece a little bit later down the road, because honestly, it's probably going to take a few weeks, if not months, to get the full perspective and scope of how it functions, how it works in daily use, and some of the limitations or cool features that it does have, because I've had this thing for like 40 minutes and about 25 of those was actually driving with it, and it honestly was really cool. Granted, it does feel like it's coming full circle, because when I did the old gauge cluster overlay kit, that one was basically like a placeholder until I was able to get this one, because I knew I wanted to get this one, and I'm so happy that it's finally a part of this build. So this Tahoe is really coming together, especially from where we found her. If you want to ignore the fact that this vehicle is dirty, it'd be very much appreciated, because she's been getting worked on for a good chunk of time now. But to kind of give you a little bit more perspective of what we've done to this vehicle so far, we have new headlight housings with the DRLs, we have new headlights, specifically the LEDs from Las Vegas Auto Lighting, we have a new grille, we have this nice painted bow tie, we have a new bumper as well, the new fender flares, we have these new wheels, which again are basically just the placeholders for right now. Coming in, we have the new gauge cluster, we have the new head unit, we have the nice new bench seat, and rounding it out with these LED taillights. So it's definitely been a lot of progress, a lot of fun upgrades. But to kind of run down the list of what's still left for this vehicle, so we do still have some pieces for the dash. We have a replacement cup holder. We also have a replacement little set of knobs for the AC. Need to get the bench seat reupholstered in blue vinyl. And then to close it all out, a nice beefy set of wheels and tires. And those are just the things from this original game plan. This is an OBS Chevy, so honestly, the possibilities are endless with this thing. But we are very much enjoying the process and taking it one day at a time. But that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you in the next one.